Hello everybody. So today I want to show you a device that I made that'll allow you to skip ender pearls along a channel of bubble streams in a perfectly consistent way. So the way that we use it is we come over here, we come near the edge of the block, and we look straight down and we throw it into the water stream. And the machine will take a little bit of time to line up the ender pearl. And then when it's done, it'll launch the ender pearl, and the ender pearl will land up somewhere around here. And if I go and throw a second ender pearl, then what we'll see is that the second ender pearl ends up in the exact same place as the first ender pearl. So we can go over and see this one's kind of stopped over here. And the second ender pearl will land up in the same place. And not only will it land up in the same place, it'll get here in the exact same way. So it'll take the same trajectory, it'll have the same speed as it did before, bounce in the same places the same number of times. Everything's going to be the exact same. So we see it ended up in the same place. Right. So the reason that I made this device is because in a recent Let's Play video by Etho, he noticed that his ender portals were breaking because when he died, his ender pearls would get reset. And that was something that was changed a couple updates ago. And so he wanted a quick way to transport his ender pearls across the world to reset his ender porters. And so this was his idea, to skip the ender pearls across the water, but he was having trouble to get it to work consistently. So the way that it works is that, or the way that sort of launching ender pearls across these streams work, is that how far the ender pearl goes and the trajectory it takes is based on the height of the ender pearl in its bounce and its vertical velocity when you hit it with a slime block. And the reason for that is that if you hit the ender pearl when it's really high in its bounce, then what's going to happen is the ender pearl is going to fall a long distance before it hits the water. And if it falls a long distance before it hits the water, then it's going to go deep into the water. It's going to be moving really fast when it hits the water, and it's going to go deep into the water, and it's going to spend a longer time in the water, so it's going to slow down more. So I just kill all the ender pearls. So maybe we can see that again. So that last one, I kind of hit it high up in its bounce, and we see it didn't go as far. So we'll try to do it again. See, so this time it went really deep into the water, and so it bounced really high, but it didn't go very far horizontally. So what that means is that if we want to launch the ender pearl consistently, we need to hit it at the same point in its bounce and when it has the same vertical speed in its bounce. And that's kind of hard because if we look at sort of how the ender pearl bounces, we can sort of see that it's like a chaotic process. Like it's kind of hard to predict how it's going to bounce next. And that would be okay because the ender pearl still interacts with the bubble stream in a consistent way. So if we throw the ender pearl at the bubble stream with the same angle and the same speed and the same from the same position, then the ender pearl is always going to bounce in the same way. So if we can just time how long it's been since we've thrown the ender pearl, and we can sort of line ourselves up maybe with some pistons into one position, into a consistent position, and throw it at a consistent angle, then maybe we can launch the ender pearl in the same way every time. But that actually won't work. And the reason that won't work is because even though the ender pearl throw is consistent in its position from where we throw it, so every time I throw it, it'll throw from the same spot in the character model, it throws with a different speed each time. So the speed that I throw an ender pearl at is actually random. So what that means is that it's not enough to just have the exact same angle and position when we throw the ender pearl. We actually need to do a little bit more. And so the way that I've solved this problem is actually by using another trick that Etho shows off in his video. So if I go here, I throw the ender pearl, and we just watch how it works. We'll see that the ender pearl gets pulled upwards by this piston before we launch it. And so what's going on is that when the piston pulls the ender pearl upwards, it will actually drop it from the exact same height and with zero velocity. So we can kind of see that over here. If I have a piston and I put down some blocks, I kind of walk into the piston arm and I turn off the piston, it's going to pull me over. So what that means is that we can retract the ender pearls. So I have one over here. We can retract the ender pearls with the piston arm. Oh, is this a visual bug? I can't really tell. I think it might be. We can retract the ender pearls with the piston arm. Yeah, I think it's a visual bug. And set them up in the same at the same height and drop them from the same speed. So I'm just gonna set up an ender pearl. I'm gonna break one of these slime block launchers so I can set up an ender pearl so I can show this off. Right. So you can also push entities with a piston, right? But if we try to push an ender pearl, oh no. If we try to push an ender pearl, then the ender pearl is, if we try to push it upwards to set it into the same position, then the ender pearl is just going to hit the piston. So we want to be able to pull the ender pearl so that we don't have to risk the piston hitting the ender pearl. And if we try to push the ender pearl downwards, then the ender pearl is going to go into the water and then it's going to bounce back upwards and hit the piston. So that's why we want to retract the ender pearl. But if we do try to retract the ender pearl, then first we have to push the piston arm out, right? And that's going to push the ender pearl too far away to actually be able to retract it. So the thing that we do is the thing that Ethos showed off in his video is that we zero tick the ender pearl. So when we zero tick an entity, or when we zero tick a piston, the piston teleports just immediately to the end of its extension cycle and then starts retracting. So when we zero tick the piston, we're able to sort of go past the ender pearl and then begin retracting it so that we never risk hitting it with the piston arm. And that's actually a thing that all entities experience. They don't get pushed by zero ticking of a piston, but they will get pulled. Right, so then all we have to do is we have to zero tick the ender pearl when it's somewhere within this block. But that's actually a little bit more difficult than it sounds. So if we go over here and we try to zero tick the ender pearls, most of the time it's going to work. But see, right there, every once in a while, the ender pearls are going to be too far away from the piston to get pulled back. So even though the ender pearls are within a block of this piston, they're still not getting pulled back by the zero tick. So that means that even if we get the ender pearl within a block away from the piston, we won't necessarily be able to pull it up every single time, and then it'll hit the water in a random way or in an unpredictable way, and we'll launch it in an unpredictable way. And to make matters worse, sometimes the ender pearl is even underneath the water, right? It's bouncing up and down, and sometimes it's a little bit underneath the water. So we can't predict where it is, or we can't pull it up when it's underneath the water. So the way that we do this is using tripwire hooks. Tripwire hooks and this bubble stream. So when we throw the ender pearl in this bubble stream, that'll slow the ender pearl down, and so that'll reduce the range of speeds that we throw the ender pearl at. So if we throw it at a certain range of speeds, and we divide all of those speeds by 2, that'll also divide the range of speeds by 2 as well. So if we slow down the ender pearl, then we can get it to fall out of this tube at a consistent, or at a more consistent speed, at a more predictable speed. So the way that we do that is that we wait for the ender pearl to be sort of near the top of its jump, and then it triggers this tripwire hook, which goes down and triggers this hopper clock, and that pulls back this piston and this soul sand, and that turns off the bubble stream and lets the ender pearl fall down. So now the ender pearl is falling from almost 0 velocity, and it's falling through water, so it's falling at a slower rate than it would normally if it was falling through the air. Right, so that makes the ender pearl have a more consistent speed when it comes out of this tube. So then it falls past this tripwire hook with this more consistent speed, and that's accurate enough, that gives us enough predictability with the ender pearl speed that we know approximately where it's going to be when we zero tick the piston, and so we can know that it's approximately within this range to be zero ticked when we launch it. So get it again. It'll trigger the tripwire, and that'll cause this block to come out and pull it upwards. Right, there's a couple subtleties with that though. So firstly, tripwires don't always get activated by ender pearls. So here it's kind of working every time, but there we see that it didn't work. And the reason that it doesn't work is that tripwires take a couple of game ticks to detect an entity, that an entity is inside of them. So ender pearls are typically just moving too fast for the tripwire to be able to detect them. So sometimes it just won't work. And that's why at the top, when I throw the ender pearl just goes past the tripwire hook without triggering it. So the tripwire hook is so close that every single ender pearl throw that I make, the tripwire hook will never detect it. Where'd it go? I guess it already went off there. So that's sort of a second use of this bubble stream. It slows down the ender pearl enough so that this second tripwire will detect it. The second subtlety to this bubble stream is that you might think that maybe I can just remove this tripwire and then sort of we're gonna have to wait for it to come back. Throw an ender pearl and maybe just like hit a button here. Maybe right there. When the ender pearl is somewhere at the top of the stream, and that'll have the same effect, right? That'll drop the ender pearl from almost zero velocity, and so it'll have a smaller range of speeds. We can predict where it is and everything. But if we do that, then sometimes when we hit the button, the ender pearl is going to be like at the top of its bounce, and sometimes it's going to be maybe in the water, and that actually creates enough randomness that the range of speeds when it comes out the bottom is too unpredictable. And so we won't be able to predict with enough accuracy where the ender pearl is to be able to zero ticket upwards from this position like 100% of the time. So we need to put this tripwire hook, or by putting this tripwire hook here, we kind of turn off the soul sand at the bottom. We sort of turn off the bubble stream at approximately the same time in the ender pearl's bounce. So turning off the bubble stream using this tripwire just adds a little bit of consistency to the system. And that's just enough to be able to predict where it is to zero ticket upwards. Right. So that's the basis. That's the main basis of how it works. So if you want to see the timings, this has 6 items in it. Kind of looks like this. These repeaters are on 7 redstone ticks. There's kind of a weird configuration here. I had to play around with it a lot to get it to be consistent. This is the 0 tick pulse generator that I'm using, and the slime block goes off after 2 redstone ticks. And this just pushes the piston, this 0 ticking piston into place after the ender pearl has fallen past the piston. Right. So that's basically it. There's still one more subtlety though, and it's quite important for these slime block launchers here, the way that I set them up. So if we look at these, all the ender pearls are in the same Z position. This is the Z direction down this way. But they're also like at exactly the same Z position, right? Like they're not sort of spread around one Z position. So in the X direction, they're kind of spread a little bit, but in the Z position, they're in the exact same place. So you might expect, right, that like sometimes if I throw the ender pearl from here, and if I throw it maybe from over here, then sometimes they're going to go a little bit further, or they're going to be a little bit closer. But that's not the case. And the reason that's not the case is because when I launch an ender pearl with a slime block launcher, or when the slime block launcher launches it, rather, it doesn't launch the ender pearl from the position of the ender pearl. It launches it right from the edge of the block. So you can maybe see it there. The ender pearl kind of teleported to the end and then started moving. So we can try it again. I make it more obvious. Yeah, maybe it's kind of hard to see. but the ender pearl always gets launched from exactly the same Z position. So it doesn't matter if we throw the ender pearl from like over here or over here. And that's really important, right? Because the ender pearl might be bouncing, and sometimes it lands on the tripwire. So I remove this tripwire. Oh, whoops. Sometimes it lands on the tripwire over here and triggers it over here, and so then it goes far enough that when this device comes out and hits it, it'll push it forward. But then other times it might land on the tripwire hook over here, and so when the device comes out to push the ender pearl forward, the ender pearl might be like maybe somewhere over here, and you'd get teleported, too early, and the ender pearl wouldn't make it to the end. So that doesn't happen though, because we always launch it from the same Z location, so it always hits this tripwire hook in exactly the same place, and going the exact same speed. So to set these up, I only had to sort of set them up for one ender pearl throw, and then they worked every single time. Yeah, so that's basically it. There's a couple more subtleties to using the machine as well. You have to look straight down when you're using the machine, so you don't have to go right to the edge of the block. As long as the ender pearl goes into the bubble stream, it'll work out okay. But if you kind of go on an angle a little bit, then the ender pearl will have a sufficiently different speed that sometimes the machine won't be able to zero ticket upwards, or at the very least, it won't zero ticket upwards in the same way. So I think that time it worked. Yeah, that time it was the same. So it didn't go to here because I replaced this tripwire hook. But maybe if I try it again, then I can get it to fail. So yeah, so it's mostly consistent still, but it's best to just always look straight down. Another little subtlety is that these trapdoors, for some reason, if I go like all the way to the edge of this block, then it just won't work. I don't really know why. I wonder if it's maybe something about the details of. So I think that time it worked as well, but I wonder if it's something about the details of how the slime block launcher works or something like that. But for whatever reason, I need these trapdoors here. Otherwise, sometimes the ender pearl just won't do the same thing. So if I go all the way to the right here and throw the ender pearl, I think I was facing all the way downwards. I hope I was. Otherwise, this won't work. Yeah, so this is going to go to the same place. But yeah, I don't know why that happens. But if I put the trapdoors there, everything's typically okay. But yeah, anyway, that's the whole machine. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.